Yes, very good afternoon to all the dear participants.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, so so we start it or we wait for 1 or 2 minutes? Yeah, madam, should we start now or wait for 2 3 minutes?
You may start, sir.
Okay. Yeah, dear friends, I think let me recapitulate what we discussed yesterday and then move forward. So yesterday, and I think let me tell you that today we may have little shorter class because I have some health issues. I have to go for checkup. So we'll have a shorter class, but we'll try to finish it by time. Uh, I think yesterday at the last part, we discussed about ethical concerns or ethical issues relating to field work or ethnographic work. So, important ethical concerns were informed consent, confidentiality, and then also building trust with the subjects. And we ended there. And informed consent is something that the researcher needs to negotiate with communities for taking their consent or agreement to join in a research. And that has become mandatory because almost all international and national agencies that fund research or that provides support to different kinds of research, especially social science research that involves human beings, it has become mandatory. And if you publish any of your findings in research journals of repute, then the publishers would always ask you whether you have ethical clearance from institutional ethics committee, which means every institute has an institutional ethics committee. That committee would go through your project proposal, your research, even for dissertation or thesis or for any kind of project. And if the committee has approved that yes, the researcher would go through all the ethical ways or would adopt all ethical methods of data collection, then your article will be accepted for publication or your dissertation and thesis will be allowed to be submitted to the university or college wherever you are admitted. So that is important, and this is also at the individual level for a researcher to uh, to maintain a standard that you have self-regulation. You are a person that you have high standard of moral, so that you do not do any harm to the subject. So that comes under informed consent. And the second important thing was confidentiality, that the identity of your subject participant, you should not reveal any of the information that you have collected from that particular subject participant without the agreement or without the consent of that person. So these are the two important things one would always remember as a researcher. I think this is where we ended yesterday, and today we shall discuss um, Unit 2, that is ethnography. What is ethnography and its aim, objective, different concepts of ethnography. Then ethnography and its methodology, how ethnography, there are methods used for uh, carrying out ethnographic research. Then ethnography and its ethics, what are the ethical concerns? Again, carrying out ethnography. Then we would move to another section where different concepts of ethnography should be discussed. So, very briefly, let me tell you ethnography, as we discussed earlier, also ethnography is something. Ethno means people, graphy means to document, to study. So, studying, documenting any community, any culture, any society would come to be considered as ethnography and anthropologist, and it is a qualitative research method. So, ethnographic method is a qualitative method of research that is primarily used by anthropologists and other social sciences, and it is also a technique employed for procuring empirical data on human society and culture through methods like participant observation, interviews, questionnaires, focus group discussion, and nowadays other methods like PRA, RRA, rapid research appraisal, participatory research appraisal. So these kind of methods are also being used. Some people use this as method. Some would say it is a research tool. So primarily, all these methods are used in a study that is called field study or case report by maybe in the field of science, people call it as case study or field study. But in social science, it is ethnography. And as a researcher, what is so important is to maintain objectivity. Because as we discussed in earlier classes, anthropologists go to study other cultures, people other than them, their own culture. So when you go and study, there would be many things that would be new to you. So, what would be important is to maintain objectivity because you should not be so either very, very emotional or be very, very subjective to have your own opinion and analysis. But you have to be very objectively just see what you see, you just report. And what anthropologists do is, yesterday we discussed in detail, anthropology, anthropologists, they select a field. Field means a geography or a place with action, and they go there, learn the language, stay there, observe people. Observation becomes a tool per few. It is a method. So that tool they use observation, which can be participant observation. When you participate with the people in, suppose you are documenting a marriage ceremony, then you participate in the marriage procession as one of the members of the family. Then there is non-participant. In order to maintain your objectivity as a researcher, you participate, but you also be very, very aware that you are a researcher. You are not one among them, because once you immerse, become one of them, then you would lose the sight of documenting many things which are important but looks very obvious. Means many of the things that you said, oh, this is something very simple, this is something I know, this is something that is also used in my society, so you ignore those things. But those important but simple small things also makes a lot of meaning. That is why as a researcher, you should play between subjectivity and objectivity. Like you should have a subjective view of a situation, but you give more emphasis to objectivity. What you see, you write and report. And there are many people who want to pursue ethnography as a career, have to study cultural anthropology. And if possible, they should make use of fieldwork opportunity in school to see whether they can enjoy doing fieldwork. I do not know whether all of you, or many of you, or none of you have experience of doing fieldwork. Because in anthropology, fieldwork or doing carrying out ethnographic research is an integral part. Without doing fieldwork, you may not be able to understand all the tools, techniques, methods, use of methodology that helps us to understand a society or group of people they are that are alien to us, that are stranger to us. Anthropology teaches us through fieldwork tradition, through ethnographic account, how to carry out fieldwork for the sake of collecting information and data that would make meaning to understand people other than us. So, in general, ethnography and ethnology, we studied ethnology that is being used in Europe, especially in Germany. Ethno means people, logy is to study. So, ethnography and is account of people, ethnology is study of people. So, are considered to be area of interest for anthropologists who are generalists and interested in relationship between people and the physical, socio-political
Excuse me, sir.
perspective. Yes.
Sir, can you please repeat what is the difference between ethnography and ethnology?
Okay. Yeah. Ethnology is ethno means people. Logy means logos, like to discourse, to study, to understand. Ethnography is drawing people. I think ethnography is documenting or graphical presentation of a community study. So ethnography is documenting, studying and documenting people's life, people's culture. So both ethnography is a kind of cultural anthropological method. So many times people use the same word as ethnology as cultural anthropology or social anthropology. Ethnology. Ethnography is method of studying people. Okay. The root
Okay,
term
sir. Thank you.
ethno means people. Graphy is to document, to study, to again. I think it also has similar kind of meaning. But ethnology is studying people, like anthropology. Other name of anthropology, especially cultural anthropology, is ethnology. And this is the term still used in Europe, especially in Germany. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Then, what are the theoretical foundation for or the criteria of ethnographic research? The structure and principle of ethnographic research are derived from anthropology, and they determine the perspectives and direct theory and models of research, because how to carry out a research, how to design a research so that that helps you to dig out information or data from a population that you do not know much but you are interested in, or how you have divided doing research is asking a question and getting answer to that question. And when you ask a question and try to get an answer to that, then you design a study. And ethnography is designing a study design, making a study design that would help you to get good quality of data that help you to understand the society better or to answer the question that you have asked. For example, if you have designed a question or you have asked a question, why dropout rates or how dropout rates in tribal areas has come down or whether it has come down. If dropout rates, just simply study the dropout rates among the tribal communities of Odisha. And you may have a hypothesis or presumption or assumption that yes, dropout rate has come down. Now you go to the field, collect data. So how to collect data? Because tribal society in Odisha will be very large. There are 62 different kinds of tribal communities. So how to collect data, and for collection of data you have to design, because if you are writing on all of the tribal groups, because there are 62, people would definitely ask you how you have designed your study so that it is representative of all the 62 tribes. And when you write a report and give any recommendation or suggestion, whether it will be applicable to all different kinds of context that you have from all the tribal groups. Because as we discussed in the initial class, tribals are not a monolith. Just because all the tribals are not same. There are different kinds of tribal groups. There are tribal groups based on their economy or subsistence can be divided into three or four. One, there are tribal groups who are practicing hunting and gathering mode of economy. There are some who are into pastoralism or nomadic way of life. There are others who are into agriculture. There are few others who have joined the industrial economy or are living in urban areas or semi-urban areas. So this is based on subsistence, hunting, gathering, agriculture, or industrial. Then there will be people who are based on other criteria also, language, race, all those things. So in order to understand them, what kind of design you will frame so that it captures the reality of all different types of groups. So that becomes an interesting area to inquire in ethnography. And yesterday we also I told you how to select a village, how to go and have access of a village through headman, then how to identify key informants, how to establish rapport or develop trust with people. So these are the important things in ethnography. So, in cultural anthropology or anthropology is general, the core idea is culture. So, ethnographers make a detailed study of culture. Culture is all the norms, values, ideas, um, technology, whatever people have acquired through their life, throughout their life, or in their own generation, pass on to the next generation. That is what is culture. You acquired it as a collective learning. So ethnography focuses on understanding that culture. And what are the important items? I think this will be a little a repetition of what we have discussed in in the data collection. Uh, uh, you have to have understanding of some of the key terms in ethnographic research. One is holism. I think we discussed it in the earlier class, but somebody asked me in the last class or previous class, what is holism? So, ethnographers or anthropologists perceive human action in the context of the whole system. If you want to study a village, so you have to village every aspect of village's life. So, context of the whole system as individual actions are manifestation of cultural standards and principles of large socio-cultural systems. Therefore, many feminists have employed critical ethnography to explain invisibility, oppression, and exploitation of women in the context of the family and society. So let me give very simple explanation or explain it. So what holism means? Holism is suppose you observe one of your tribal friends sitting in a classroom behaving in a particular way or responding to a particular social stimuli in a different way. So holism means you have to understand why that individual is responding in a particular manner. The answer would be he is responding because he has learned that pattern of behavior as a member of his community, and that is why he is behaving in such a manner. And so, to understand why he has behaved in such a way, you have to understand the cultural and social context where he has been socialized, how where he has brought up. So, in order to understand a specific action of an individual, you need to put that individual in the context of his society so that all the patterns of behavior that he has learned and based on that he is responding here would, would be better appreciated. So that is why he's saying all the feminists, those who take a feministic view of society, suppose a lady has been abused or faced oppression in her life, then you have to go back. How and her reaction to oppression need to be understood in the cultural and social context where she is set up. So that is what is holism. And the other meaning of holism is in order to understand one part of a behavior or culture, then you need to appreciate the whole. Small pie from a cake, I was giving that example. So, in order to if your focus is to understand the pie, a small portion, 20% portion of a 360 degree kind of cake, then in order to understand the 20%, suppose health issue becomes 20%, economy becomes 20%. In order to understand health, you need to understand the entirety, the community in entirety. To make it more simple, if if suppose why tribal people go to the shaman or the local medicine man over in comparison to the modern hospital, suppose that becomes an issue for you, then you have to really understand their decision making process, their economic organization. That would explain you their ability to take a decision or the context in which they take a decision. Because going to a shaman, maybe there may be n number of explanation, n number of factors why about the decision that tribal individual takes. He or she may have strong belief as part of that culture to have faith in a shaman who understands his problem better compared to a modern doctor. Or he may have economic issues. If going to modern hospital may cost in travel, in medicine, and in consultation and other things. So that is why economy, his earning becomes a critical factor. So his belief, values, or norms can be a factor, money can be a factor, decision making, who takes the decision, if the village headman takes the decision or the family head takes the decision, it depends on family, the belief of the family head. If the mother-in-law believes that home delivery is better than institutional delivery, she would force the daughter-in-law who is young, who is new to the family. So you need to understand the context in order to understand the decision that individuals take. So holism becomes very, very important item in ethnographic research. Then in-depth studies. So ethnographers are interested in making in-depth studies, but not in surface counting, survey data. So I'm not going beyond the book to explain that ethnographic research, especially carried out in anthropology, is in-depth in nature. In-depth means you have to go deeper into the level of data collection, not at the surface level. Suppose you indulge with somebody in an interview to ask about her feelings or her decision-making ability, then if you just ask at the superficial level, people may or may not tell you the right kind of, give you right kind of information. But once you spend more time, develop rapport, develop trust with the individual, and spend more time, you go on asking, then go on probing different aspects of this, different facets of the question. So they would have trust and they would tell you the truth. It is just like an onion. If you peel it, the first layer, then if you are satisfied with what you see, then you are not a good researcher, not a good ethnographer. You have to peel the second layer, the third layer, the fourth layer, then the real data would come. And in-depth studies, the opposite of it is survey kind of study. Survey kind of study is usually not carried out by anthropologists, but many other social sciences do. Anthropologists sometimes do. Survey is for quick information, quick data collection. That helps you to help policymakers who have less time to implement projects. And survey is you go to the village, and survey kind of method is uh, done especially for quantitative kind of research, not for qualitative. For qualitative, you have to understand human values, norms, behavior. All these things require deeper understanding of society. Somebody was asking me about anthropology and sociology. So here is something. So anthropologists are conventionally or traditionally interested in primitive cultures, simple societies, tribal societies, small-scale societies, whereas sociologists and other social scientists deal with modern societies and culture. Despite this division, ethnography as a method is still employed by anthropologists, sociologists, and other social scientists, irrespective of their chronological orientation, how the discipline has started. But irrespective of that, they give importance to chronology. And then the interactive reactive approach. In order to study research topic most effectively, the ethnographers gather first-hand information by employing a dynamic form of data collection and analysis that is based on flexibility, reactivity, and self-correction. This enables him to adjust to the approach, design, and method. What it means? It means when a researcher go to a village or go to a community, he collects data by staying there, interacting with people. But at the same time, the researcher has to keep himself or herself very, very flexible to change his hypothesis, to change his understanding in the society. Based on the experiences of day one, you may change your strategy on day two. And you have to be very reactive and self correction. You should open yourself to correct. If you prejudge or have a prior opinion about this society and you go with a very closed mind, so that may hinder collecting good quality of data. You should keep yourself little flexible, little open-minded to change yourself in the field, depending on the field situation. Because what are the opinion we normally draw based on which we design our study. Suppose a study that has been carried out among the Munda, suppose in 1980s or 90s, but the societies are changing. Like many of us, always we believe that when we study tribals, I'm just giving a lot of examples from tribals because primarily anthropology give emphasis to primitive societies or tribal societies. So that is why I give example from them. It will be easier to relate or to understand. Many times when we go to study the tribal areas, so a lot of self-reflection. Or suppose some one study has been done in 20 or 30 years or 40 years back. The researcher has given an opinion about the community, or the facts about the communities are different, but the societies are changing. And what happens, many anthropologists and social scientists who study simple societies or indigenous group believe that they are static. Tribals do not change. We have the same opinion. Oh, Bonda, they must be uh, Bonda tribe or Munda tribe or Juanga. Oh, they are very, very backward. They must be have living in this condition. But no, as we are changing, you can relate with your own life. What you were 15 years back, your family was 15 years back, has changed drastically. So, as we are changing, the tribals and any other community is also changing. No society is static. They're all dynamic or they're amenable to change. So, if you have a preconceived idea about done about a community, and when you go, the reality would be very, very different. Until unless you keep yourself open, flexible, and subject to self correction, then it will be difficult for you to gather realistic data. Then one should also have humanistic perspective. You should be very humble, have a humanistic approach to love people, to accept the way of life they have, and you have to accept them as they are. You cannot always expect them to behave in a way that people in your own community behave, because you have to understand them that they are a different group. They have a way of life which is unique to them. We need to appreciate those diversities, appreciate those differences. Then you would become a good ethnographer. Then cross-cultural framework of reference. So ethnography research makes use of previously collected information to understand other cultures and environment and to gear up the study to achieve more effective and realistic goal. I think this is what we discussed in the first class also. As I said earlier, anthropology, if you ask me the three core values of anthropology, I would mention holism or holistic understanding or totalistic study is the first core value of anthropology. Second would be primary and empirical data collection, because anthropologists are the only social scientists who rely more on primary data collection by themselves, not by others. So we give more emphasis to primary data collection, which is through fieldwork or ethnographic research. We do not rely much on secondary resources. Suppose you might have a friend in history, if somebody is doing MPhil or PhD or any kind of research, they can go to the archive or rely on newspaper items or study books and write a thesis. Sociologists can combine secondary source and little bit of primary. But for anthropologists, primary of their data, most a component of their data is primary. So, so when you collect that, and the, suppose this is primary. Third is cross-cultural comparison. Anthropological study always believe in comparing with the other, maybe comparing with your own community with the studied community, or comparing studied community with community X, Y, Z. And remember, another cultural relativism is also another important concept in anthropology. Cultural relativism, you must be knowing it. Cultural relativism means you need to appreciate the uniqueness of any community and need to understand them on the merit of their own, not compare anybody as superior or inferior. Everybody needs to be understood in their own context. So that is the strength of anthropology. And what are the aims, objectives, and the concept of ethnography? So ethnography's aim is to study people, carry out research on other people by living with them, being part of them, and gathering data and giving emphasis on the emic perspective. There are two perspectives of looking at things. One is emic, another is etic. Emic is subjects or research participants or communities' way of looking at things, or community's perspective, studied community's perspective. Etic is researchers' point of view, researchers' way of looking at things, or outsiders, insider and outsider. Insiders' way of looking at it is emic. And in ethnographic research, we always give primacy or importance to emic perspective. So that is very important in ethnographic research. And what are the essential part of in the design of ethnographic research is, as we saw in the case of Malinowski. Malinowski studied the Trovian Islanders. So the first thing he did is he stayed for a long time, 11 months or so. He learned the language. So in ethnographic research, one is expected to learn the local language, because language is something that would explain and decode the culture. Until unless you understand the local language, it is very difficult to delve into the deeper meaning of things. So that is why somebody also asked me, I think yesterday or day before, why language should be given so much of importance. So language learning, especially native language, is also very important. Then kinship ties, and you need to understand the kinship. And we will later on study genealogy and tree, family tree. So kinship ties are very important, because most of the tribal communities in India, or simple rural societies in India, based on kinship. And then census information. So census information are also very important part of ethnographic research. Uh, when you go to a village, we also discuss this. First doing mapping, then listing or numbering of the villages, households, then going for census information. If you have selected a village, you must have a good idea of the demographic composition of the village. So in ethnographic research, doing census or census information is very, very crucial because census, household census will tell you how many infants are there, how many children, adolescent, adult, old age people, how many pregnant women, how many ever married women, how many widows, separatees. So different categories of people, because that would give you a clue to understand many of the societal issues, societal problems. Then historical data. This we would discuss in detail. Historical data is history is also very important. History of a community or a family or a subject is also very, very important. And there are two ways how you can do historical information or data collection. One is through secondary source by going to archives, by reading, going through editorial materials of a newspaper or books or narratives from very old people who have knowledge of social history of the region or the community. So they would give a lot of hints about historical data. But another way of looking at the smaller history of the community is we also do a lot of things in our demographic or nutritional health data. So what you can do is, suppose you need to understand uh, how people used to deliver their child, how they get prepared, how the community used to get prepared for a child birth. Can you know it? What was happening 50 years back, or 40 years back, 30 years back? It is difficult. If there is no written document, secondary source in archives or library or books or newspaper is not available, and many would not be available. So, what is the best method that you have? And to compare it with what is happening in the present period. The best way that you can design your ethnographic study is to divide the entire population into three groups. One, the young mother, who are 15 to 30 years, the middle aged mothers, who are 31 to 45 years old, and then the old mothers, who are 46 plus. So, by doing that, suppose if you ask a young mother, how did you give birth to your last child? She would say, if it was a home delivery, she would say, okay, the dye was there. Or if it is an institutional delivery, which is very, very common now, she would say that Asa Didi had registered my name. When I had labor pain, she took me in 108 vehicle ambulance, and then I went to the hospital. There was checkup. Then this happened, that happened, and I had the last child born there in the hospital with a cesarean or normal delivery. If you ask the middle age, she would have some different narratives because modern healthcare systems, especially Asa Didi, 108, all those things and hospital facilities may or may not have been available that time. If you ask the old lady, nearly 100% would say that they had a delivery being assisted by the dai or the traditional birth attendant. And how did you prepare for that? She would narrate you, map you a situation where the Entudishala or the delivery place, the room, how it looked, and how did the Dai manage the difficult birth, where she had a long labor pain, what are the medicines they gave, and after the childbirth, whether they gave the first milk uh, from the mother, and how did whether they gave birth to the child. They would immediately, the old lady would compare. Nowadays in hospital they give birth to the child. We did not give. We used to give seko like with they would the firewood seko they would give. So all these and what kind of oil they would massage. So all these different narratives would come. So this is also a limited historical approach, but this is again a historical approach that gives us clue how the society has transited, how it has changed over the year. So all these structural and functional aspect of society and societal institutions can be documented by applying different kinds of methods, whether it is kinship, whether it is historical, whether it is comparative. All these things are essential component of ethnographic research and ethnography and its methodology. So, ethnographic study tends to rely on a number of particular data collection techniques, such as naturalistic observation, documentary analysis, and in-depth interviews. Suppose somebody, uh, suppose there are certain things you can document. Suppose how primitive tribal groups engage themselves in forest collection. They collect lot of their life. Most of the primitive tribal groups rely on for their livelihood on forest. They would go for gathering of firewood. They would go for collection of green vegetables or sago, or they would go for honey collection or mushroom collection because there are different kinds of food items that is available in the jungle or the forest. So they, they would go for collection of that. So that either you can go for documentary evidence, you can go with a camera and recorder and then and document all the different kinds of food that is available. But as a researcher, if you are not available at a point of time, and suppose, let me give you another example. Suppose life cycle rituals. Life cycle means all the important vital events that happens in individual's life. Suppose birth, marriage, birth, menarche, marriage, and death. These are three or four important events that happens to everybody's life. Menarche, the first menstruation, happens only to female, not to the male. And this birth, marriage, and death happens to almost all individuals, at least birth and death. But if you are studying a community and you stay there for 2 months, it may so happen that nobody dies in the village. So you cannot document the death rituals. Maybe somebody may not take birth. You cannot document the birth rituals. Or similarly of marriage. So what do? You take in-depth interviews of all the stakeholders, the priest, the family members, the bride, the groom, the members from brides and groom's side to recreate a situation of understanding how marriage takes place. But if you are by chance there, you can document. And then there are certain things people may or may not tell you. So you have to apply another method called observation method. Let me give you one good example. Observation method is something that people may or may not tell you because for them this is be very, very obvious or very normal practice. Suppose if you are uh, if you belong to Odia community and you stay in, if you have been to suppose Delhi, in Delhi, you will say that see that Punjabis when they attend marriage functions or they go on marriage procession, they will dance. All the female and male members would dance, holding each other's hand, dance and then enjoy it. But if you closely observe Odia family. Nowadays, female members are dancing in the marriage party, but in the earlier times, it was not a practice. But you would, if you are closely observing and using observation as a method, you would see that some female members are avoiding to touch some male members, even if it is a festive movement. So that would definitely strike you if you are comparing the Punjabi marriage Bharat party and Odia Bharat party. You would see that in Punjabi everybody is getting along with each other, but in Odia they are avoiding. So Dedasura and Bhaibo, they would avoid each other, even if they belong to same age group. But in Punjabi, that may not be the case. So that gives a clue to you. So there are kinship members who avoid each other, and there are members who are into joking relationship. They get along well.
Yes, sir. It is called avoidance concept.
Yes. So that kind of observation. So this comes under only observation. You may or may not, and observation becomes a tool because when getting information on certain things are very sensitive, and people may not be open up to tell something to you, but you observe because they would say no. Or whether when you ask, do you practice this kind of thing in your marriage? Because if they feel that it is very conservative practice, in order to protect their own community's image, they would say no, no, no. ଆପଣଙ୍କର ଯେମିତି ହେଉଛି ଆମର ବି ସେମିତି ହେଉଛି. So as it is happening in your society, this is also same in our society. But in reality, it will be very different. So how you check it? You check through observation method. So observation could be participant observation. You participate in the whole event, but at the same time you maintain your objectivity. It is like it is like you are watching the drama or the scene on the stage, but also you are maintaining the distance. You are both a participant and also a non-participant. So that is difficult, but in anthropology, so this is also a key term in anthropological research, especially ethnographic research. And then interviewing. So there are a number of tools used in ethnography research. One is interviewing. Interviewing is also kind of engaged in a dialogue with somebody with a set of questions. You have set of questions which can be close-ended, can be open-ended, but you ask the person about certain things that you are interested in. He or she would narrate his experiences or opinion. Then you document that. That gives very good data for you to analyze. So interview questions could be as I said, could be structured, semi-structured. It can be informal. It can be retrospective interviews. So all different kinds of interviews you might have seen in television, but when you do in the field, it will be little different because the subject and if you are studying a simple society as the tribal society, people may not have the ability to systematically suppose if you are interviewing a politician or an academician and you're interviewing a tribal woman, so it will be huge difference because a politician or an academician will have a very structured way of answering the question. They would tell something as it has happened. But in tribal ladies, especially old people and especially people from simple society, their life is not as systematic as you may feel. So it will be very incoherent. There will not be continuity in how they narrate things. And when there will be counters to count things, they may fail to do that. It doesn't mean that they're lying or they're not willing to tell, but their life has been like that. So you have to be very careful and very respectful to your subjects while applying this method, and very considerate also. And sometimes the interview might also, because until unless the subjects come to until unless the subjects come in terms with especially the context, they feel comfortable, they would not interact, they would say no, will not participate. And most of the time people are very honest about their moods. If they don't feel good, they would say no, they would not open up, they would limit their interaction with you. So you have to be very tactical, very careful while engaging with interviews. And interview is perhaps one of the best methods, or not best, but the most used methods in ethnographic research. Then comes questionnaire. Questionnaire is something that many a times we confused with schedule. Questionnaire is something, it's a set of questions that is sent by the researcher to the respondent, and it is usually used for literate respondents. Questionnaire is a set of questions that you send by post or through email, and the respondents give the answer, send it back to you. But again, schedule or interview schedule, two names, either schedule or interview schedule. Again, set of questions can be open-ended or close-ended. Means there can be limited number of questions with having closed end, or there can be it can be open. You can change the number of questions or type of question depending on the context and respondent's nature. So, interview schedule is something that you filled up yourself as a researcher while taking the interview. Then there are other things also, like project techniques. Then you have outcroppings. Outcrop, I think, let me read out a little bit also. These supplements and enhance the fieldwork, the projective techniques. They are helpful for gathering cultural and psychological information from group members. The participants' response usually reveal individual needs, fears, inclination, general worldview. The research in blood tests are a classic projective technique, and many anthropologists adopt this test to fit the local context. As such, these techniques can be clues to lead to further inquiry or one of the several sources of information to support ongoing hypotheses. And only ethnographers' imagination limit the number of possible projective techniques. So, projective technique is something that you use to get the response from individuals because this may not be useful like a focus group discussion when you interact with a number of people on a specific focused issue. So, this is something if there is, suppose somebody is working on the impact of ethnic cleansing or ethnic class or ethnic war and how refugees are living in a place, how a particular family has been subject to uh, kind of what to say, subject to abuse or criminal act, then they would also consider whether to say or not to say many things. So you apply a technique by taking the individual into a lot of confidence, and that needs to be put into the fit into the local context to get information which are little underground or which are very very sensitive. Then you collect from few people and then apply that in many other contexts in the setup. And another thing is proxemics and kinesics. So proxemics is the analysis of socially defined distance between people. For example, the sitting arrangements of a meeting can reveal social meaning, which means suppose because the normally simple societies are very homogeneous in character and there is not much of hierarchy, but still simple societies also have people who possess hierarchically little above position, like a priest, a village headman, and other functionaries of the village in a traditional setup, or in a caste society, then upper caste, middle caste, lower caste. So, in that way also. So, society can be structured in that. So the sitting arrangement in the village, suppose the headman will have this space, next to him would be this person, next to him would be that person. So that structural way of presenting uh, power and hierarchy in a setup talks about the societal structure, the structural aspect of the society. So from the sitting arrangement, one can also understand. Let me give a small example. If in a hunting gathering society, if they go for hunt, if the male members go for hunting in a group and they hunt either a small animal or a big animal. If a small animal, they will also distribute. If it is a big animal and which would go for 2 3 days of their food requirement, but there is already decided which portion of the hunted animal would go to whom. Suppose the head would go to headman, or the chest would go here, the liver would go there, the leg portion would go there. So it is also already decided uh, based on the cultural hierarchy or the social hierarchy in the village, depending on the norms and roles played by those individuals. So proxemics is it talks about the distance of between people based on their sitting arrangement. This is an example. And then kinesics is focuses on body language. So there is another way of looking at the way people behave in a specific culture is kinesics, which focuses on body language, how people behave in a particular, how girls sit in a group, young girls, unmarried girls, the way they behave, young boys, adult. Otherwise, people would say, "Oh, he is 35 years old, but he is behaving like a child," or she is only 11 years old, she is behaving like adult. So means that goes beyond the cultural norms defined by the community, specific community. So proxemics and kinesis helps in understanding this kind of thing. And then the folk tales and folk songs or intangible cultural heritage, folk songs, folk tales. So these are the things that has been transmitted from generation to generation in a community. And folk songs and folk tales tells many things, because they do not have most of the simple societies do not have written language or written documents on anything. So everything is oral, transmitted from one generation to the other. All the songs, dances, which is appropriate for a specific occasion. Suppose marriage, there's an occasion of marriage or birth or death or monarchy related rituals or harvesting season or sowing season. So during these all these things, the emotions of people is expressed through folk songs. So these folk songs also tells many things about the relationship between man, women, old people, young people, about nature, about supernatural power, about many things, about climate change in a way. So many things can be understood through folk songs. And folk tales are also tales that talks about people's relationship with nature, with other people, other communities. So this is also in ethnography research. Folk tales, folk songs, and folk literature are also very, very important. And then what is important is ethnographic equipment. Once you go to the field work, so what are the essential thing one should take? I think nowadays everything is so technologically advanced. So you may just take your mobile phone. That would help you as a recorder, as camera, as to write something, to send message, so many things. But in earlier time, there was to be a list when we used to go for field work, pen and paper, notepads, computers nowadays, laptop, voice recorder, camera, and all these important things. But in ethnographic research, from my life experience, I can tell you there are two important things one must carry. One is field diary and field notes. Field diary is something one must write. Suppose if you decide to live in a village for a month, for 30 days, every day after you go to bed in the night, you must write your own observations and experiences in the field of interacting with people, both good and bad, as much as possible. You write in your field diary. But that is a neat kind of thing. Neat in the sense you have in Odia like rough kata and fair kata. So rough kata is something like field note. You carry a field note, pen, pencil, rubber. Uh, then you take torch with you, a water bottle. So that is a field worker's assets or important items that you carry, equipments. So field note is something you just write down, because most of the time in ethnographic research you should not open your pen and paper, that would look very, very official to a respondent. So you should write something only it is necessary. Otherwise, you just indulge into interaction with people, apply your observation method. And yes, I mean, let me tell you the ethical aspect of ethnography. When you are recording something or you are taking a picture, always ask them, get their consent, whether people are ready to pose for a picture. Without their knowledge, don't either take photographs or record their voices. That is not acceptable. Some things happened 3 4 years back. A foreigner has taken photographs of some primitive tribal groups in Odisha. So later on, his camera was seized by the district administration. So they have to take out the film of the camera, because that is not allowed, because that may be subjected to misuse, that may bring discrimination or stigma to people. So that is why you have to be very, very careful. But yes, camera is a good equipment or important thing, because photographs tells many things. As we say that a picture can tell thousands of words. But if you are taking photographs, then take appropriate consent from individuals, because it varies from community to community. Because there are certain communities like the PVTGs, you have to take permission from the nearest local district administration to take photo. Sometimes they allow, and they would say that you have to share the photographs with them. Sometimes they may not allow. This applies to the administrators and as well as to the community members. So you have to be careful and respectful to them. Then comes ethnographic processes. So how ethnography research would follow, and it follows certain procedural rules of studying people in naturally occurring settings or fields. So there is another definition of field. It is naturally occurring settings where people interact. I said that field is a place with action. So it is a definitive space. You have to define what is that space and how and why it should be called as field. And the activities is like social, economic activities, political activities that you want to study. But every research process has choices of the research site or field. Why should you take? You have to really ask a question and satisfy that why should one choose a specific field? Why district A or block B, village C? Why not otherwise? What is the justification? So in research, there should be proper justification why you select certain things. And what are the resources available for research, including money, time. Then another area is what are the resources available for carrying out the research, whether it is independent research to write a dissertation or thesis, or it is a research being funded by a funding agency. So that needs to be put into factor before you design. And negotiation of access and trust in the field. This is what we discussed roughly yesterday. When you go to the field, you have to negotiate with for access for trust. Let me give example from how we do at Utkal University Anthropology Department. If you go to study, suppose last week I was in Juanga of Dhinkanal district, in Kamaksha Nagar subdivision, Konkadahada block. So before we go to the field, our head of the department would write to the district magistrate that we are designing a study where these many master students, these many research scholars, and these many faculty members would make a group. They would go for so many days from this date to that date, and they would collect this kind of data. So you have to explain what kind of data, whether demographic, health, cultural, whatever the nature of the data you have to explain. And during the field of study, we would collect take some photographs. It will be used only for academic purpose, and this project has also been reviewed by the ethical committee. So you have to mention everything, and the outcome of the study will lead to master's degree or PhD degree or whatever. So you have to explain. Then the district administration will evaluate, and if necessary, they would contact you or they would give you a consent. Because we sent by earlier, we used to send a month before by post. Nowadays, we send 15 days back through email, and most of the times, 80% of the time, we receive a response. But what you can do is you can do some kind of background thing. Suppose if you have some acquaintances, people, you know people in the administration, you can go through them, so that your problem is understood to the administration in a proper manner. Otherwise, sometimes they would say, "Oh, why these people are coming to study?" So they would feel that this is a burden on them. So they may refuse, because there is a lot of news regarding misuse of information. And then when you think of access, getting access to the village, you have to identify who are the key persons. You must not avoid but meet them during your study. One is village headman, and then all key informant like Asa Didi, Anganwadi Didi, school teachers, PRI, Panchayat Raj institution members, then SSG group, depending on what kind of research issue that you are undertaking, what kind of problem that you want to study. If you want to study how the impact of microfinance has impacted their livelihood support system, then SSG groups would be important component of study. So you have to interview them, you have to interact with them. Then people from outside the village, like their area manager or SSG group, I do not know the name, but they're the head of that. They take decision, give loans. So that is also. And apart from government support, there are private NGOs who are supporting. There are five private microfinance companies, if that is your research problem. So you need to interact. So you have to talk to them, get prior permission, or even if it is not a permission, prior information to them. So these negotiations are also important. And the nature of fieldwork's role that is adopted when in the field and when interacting with informants. And as a field worker, you should be compassionate, you should be very respectful, you have to give utmost importance to the time given by the respondent. And as a ethical practice, you should also provide a window to the respondent to withdraw from the study at any given point of time if he or she feels that it is not useful to them. So many researchers find it very hard because suppose you want to interview somebody who is very important and you have finished 70% of the data, but the remaining 30% you feel that I will collect it tomorrow and that is very important. And the respondent would give me a very important uh, feedback or information on that. But the next day she is not available or she refuses to participate in the interview. Uh, at that time, you are in double mind what to do. But as a researcher, as a ethical conduct, you cannot force the subject. You have to respect her and be satisfied with that. And recording and then recording of data, taking photographs we have discussed. Then personal documents, studies of natural language. So it is always important that you understand their own language. Then vignettes also important, serves as a technique that involves hypothetical or real circumstances because small narratives, small play or important stories. And then triangulation. Triangulation is something where you use multiple methods. Sometimes multiple methods of that is called data triangulation, but sometimes also you can say multiple investigators. That is investigator triangulation. What it means, when you do the field work, you combine different methods. You can combine, for example, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed method. You can also do, suppose two, three people can study. Suppose let me give example from my own study because I was looking at how hospitals and clinic in India are providing a therapy called stem cell therapy. That is a technical word, but my purpose is to give what triangulation means. Stem cell therapy, that is a modern medically used therapy, drawn from some people's cell, expanded in a laboratory, and given as an injection to cure many diseases. And globally, that technique is not approved. For example, in India, Medical Council of India has not approved. So many unscrupulous or bad practiced clinics give this because they earn a lot of money from foreign patients as well as very VIP patient in India. Because that's a very trendy and very modern time therapy. So they earn a lot of money. And this is going underground, like mafia kind of thing. In hospital and clinic, this is going like that. They earn per patient maybe 15 lakhs, 20 lakhs. And each day, a good clinic can earn maybe 2 crores, 3 crores. It's a small hospital clinic can earn, which is unethical, which is illegal. We were studying that. And for my director, who was in UK in Sussex University, she interviewed people in Japan. I interviewed people in India. Some other people interviewed in UK and other things because we are mapping how globally this is happening. So what we are doing, number of researchers engaged in data collection on same issue. So that is combining things. That is triangulation. So multiple investigators looking at same problem. Similarly, multiple methods used to study something. A multiple methodological and theoretical frameworks, which is called methodological triangulation or theoretical triangulation, is combined to operate and to do carry out research. So we'll just skip something. Ethnography and its ethics, I think we have covered a little bit of it. And what is the use of ethnography? Ethnography study are used for creation of knowledge. So knowledge creation is one important aspect because many of the issues that we take up may or may not have application value, but they are used to create knowledge about certain things. For example, how tribal people dance, how the dancing is changing, how the instruments, dance instruments are changing in tribal areas, how the dormitory, the role of dormitory is changing in tribal areas. It may not have any application value to many people, but definitely it would create a knowledge base for us to understand how people lead their life. Then second is theory building in ethnographic research. So ethnographic research through inductive and deductive method also helps in building theories. Your empirical research or data collected through fieldwork can be helpful to come out with new concept or new theories to explain certain social phenomena. All these evolutionary model, diffusionism, structuralism, post-structuralism, functionalism, structural functionalism. So these are the theoretical framework that has been propounded by many people to explain the social phenomena, how societies are structured, how people interact, how communities interact with each other, how people behave. So to understand and to capture large number of societies, the way they behave, they have come out with some conceptual framework. So similarly, your study can also lead to build new theories or may also support or discard the existing theories and concepts. And ethnographic research can also be helpful in application of or research in policy making. Sometimes the government or the state wants to improve the conditions of the people, whether it is rural or tribal, but they do not have database. What exactly is going on? What is required? What is acceptable and not acceptable? What is a taboo? What is given preference? All these things are also not known to the government. So that is why many of the government programs, of course, corruption is a major part, but besides corruption, so Many things are unknown to the policymakers. So the policymakers also look forward to academicians or academic research and research outputs to frame or reframe or revise their policy framework. So that is why ethnographic research, which aims at collecting good quality data, in-depth understanding of the society and the dynamism in the society, helps people to understand. So that is why this is very, very important. And what are the techniques, methods, and methodology? We have discussed a little bit, but here and there. So, in a systematic manner, as we discussed in the earlier classes, you know that anthropology started as a colonial discipline in 18th century. People have applied number of ways to understand the others. It is anthropology is also called a study of the others. Other means the community which is different from your own. So, to understand the other, there are number of methods, tools, techniques, and finally the methodology have been designed so that you can understand. Because your own community, you may understand many things obviously. So starting from the days of Malinowski, because Malinowski thought that no, I think doing in order to understand the other, one need to stay there, not like the Morgan and others, the armchair anthropologists or theoretical anthropologists who did not go to the field, but based on travelogue reports, archival reports, and books written by others, the priests and others, they wrote about communities. Suppose you have never been to Indonesia, but you can write a book on Indonesia based on what others have written. So that is called armchair anthropological writing. But later on, people realize that no, in order to understand the other, if I want to write report on Indonesia, then I must go to Indonesia. If I am going to write uh, a thesis on Saura, I need to go and trace where the Saura lives or where the Bonda lives. Suppose Bonda lives in Malkangiri, I have to go to Malkangiri, I have to stay with them. I have to find out what different kinds of Bondas are there, where low Bonda, upper Bonda, in upper Bonda, which village really represent the traditional life. So all these factors need to be factored before you decide. So that is why ethnographic research also needs to know what are the methods and techniques used. I was giving you one example yesterday. So that would really help you to understand what tools, techniques, method, and methodology. Let me repeat that example. Then we'll come to the book. I told you that kitchen garden, then 6,000 square foot area for cultivation. Then you have a big patch of land, 6 acres of land. The one is 600 square foot, one is 6,000 square foot, another 600 square foot or 600,000 square foot. So in one, the kitchen garden, small place, if you want to cultivate brinjal, baigana lageve, so kodalare hanive. If you go to little middle size, hola langala, the big size tractor. So kodala, hola langala, and tractor, these are all tools. And tools have one purpose or objective to lighten the soil. ମାଟିକୁ ତାଡ଼ିକି ହାଲକା କରିବା so that ଯଦି ମଞ୍ଜି ପକେଇଲେ ତା ଦେହରୁ ଗଛ ଉଠିବ. Purpose is same, but tools are different. Tools are decided based on what is your problem, what is the context. The context is Kodala is used in a small patch of land, Halalangal is relatively bigger than that, and tractor is much bigger than. If you hire a tractor for your kitchen garden, that would not be suitable, that would be expensive, that may not also serve the purpose. And if you go on cultivating the land with the help of Kodala, by for 6 acres of land, it will be difficult. You will need maybe 6 months to just make the soil light. So similarly, in research, you have to understand what is a tool. Tool is something. Here, tool, Kodala, Longala, and tractor are tool to lighten the soil Objective is to lighten the soil. Here, in social research, science research, tools are something that is used for collection of data. So, your interview, case studies, focus group discussion, observation, PRA, RRA, all these are tools. The purpose of all the tools are to gather data, good quality data relating to the research problem that you have set for yourself. Suppose I want to interview an old lady who had six children, four daughters, two sons. They're well placed, they've studied. Daughters have married off, living in their in law's house. Sons have highly placed, they have gone out. The old lady is in the village. So I want to understand how she feels, whether she is feeling loneliness, whether she is accomplished and very happy that all my children are well placed, they're doing well, or she is just feeling very unhappy and deserted. That, oh, I made all these children, I think, ମୁଁ ତାଙ୍କୁ ବଡ଼ କଲି, but now they are not looking after me. She is very sad, very unhappy. Or whether she is happy with the support system. She is also happy that my children are sending money or the government is giving me both. So suppose I want to see that, and I also want to start by studying that individual. I want to trace how what is the problem of old age people in that locality. So what should I do? If I go and ask her if I send a questionnaire, so she would not feel happy. If I go and ask her questions one by one, she may not feel good. So if I go and take her as a case study, interact with her, be compassionate, be considerate to her, spend 4 or 5 days with her, observe what she's doing, whether she has difficulties in cooking, doing household chore, or going to toilet and coming back, then how she spends time with neighbors, or she doesn't have good relationship, whatever. I think what are the psychological state of mind, what are the physical elements she has, all these things needs to be studied by me to understand her state. So this one case study, so this case method becomes the most appropriate method of study. If I invite focus group discussion, like bringing other members in the society to understand her problem, so she would feel very unhappy. It is just like cultivating your kitchen garden with tractor. So the appropriate method needs to be used by the researcher. So before using it, you must know what are the instruments that I have, what are the tools I have, and which one would be more appropriate for a specific research problem, specific research participant. So similarly, so method is something like many people also use different terms for different method is something which is a way of teaching or going. Sorry, just I take a 30-second break to take a call. Yes, I'm back. Actually, I had a call. So briefly in layman's language, so tools are something that helps us, and the methodology is a grand thing because there are number of methods how to use. Okay, let me from that example, let me explain a little more. Suppose that becomes a tool, then what is the technique? Technique is there is a technique how to use kodala. So କୋଦାଳର ଯୋଉ ବେଣ୍ଟଟା ଅଛି ଆପଣ ତାକୁ ବେଣ୍ଟଟା ଧରିବେ ଆପଣ ଲୁହା ପଟକୁ ଧରିକି ଯଦି ହାଣିବେ ହବ କି ହବନି tractor there is a way how you use the steering. Similarly ଲଙ୍ଗଳ suppose there is a ଆଇରନ୍ ପାର୍ଟ ଯୋଉଟା କି ମାଟିକି ଖୋଳିବ ସୋ ଆପଣ ବଳଦର ପଛପଟେ ରହିବେ ଲଙ୍ଗଳଟା କେମିତି କରିବେ ସୋ there is a technique how you use those tools. So technique is something the way the tools is used to get the maximum impact or maximum result or output from that or the desired output from that. So that is what is technique. And what is a method? There is a method how ଲଙ୍ଗଳ or କୋଦାଳ should be go. Suppose you ଆପଣ ଗୋଟେ ପସା ଲେଫ୍ଟରେ ପକେଇଲେ ଗୋଟେ ରାଇଟରେ ପକେଇଲେ ଗୋଟେ ସେମିତି ହବ କି ନାହିଁ? There is a method that you go on straight ହାଣି ହାଣିକି ତାକୁ ଯିବେ। So ଟ୍ରାକ୍ଟର ସେମିତି ଗୋଟେ ମେଥଡ ଅଛି। ଗୋଟେ ହେଉଛି ତାକୁ ଚଲେଇବାର ଟେକ୍ନିକ୍ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ହେଉଛି ମେଥଡ if you adopt this method you will get good yield. Similarly, in social science, they are sometimes used overlappingly, but it is very clear, but it's simple to understand that tool is something good for data collection. Method is a way that you use those tools, and techniques is how you steer. Suppose technique of conducting an interview is also to put upon suppose you go to a village to an old lady. If you go and say namaste and I want to know whether you feel very unhappy that your sons are not here with you, so that is a bad approach. What is the good approach? The good approach is method is you go build relationship with the old lady, that is called rapport establishment. Then win over the trust, she feels comfortable with you, she is at with you. Then you do lot of asking, what are you doing, how you are doing, what is the source of income, how did to make her feel good, how did you raise your children, are you happy with their outcome. Then you after creating that good ambience, then you ask question difficult. First you ask good simple questions so she would feel happy. Then you ask the difficult questions, emotional questions. If you in the first question would be very emotionally draining, then she may not cooperate with you, she would feel very bad about it, that's a discourteous. So that is why this is also there is a technique and there is a method also how to put your respondents in at ease so that they can give good response to you. So other things you can read, I think these are all then coming to methods, there are different methods of doing ethnography. One is scientific method. Scientific method is generally a set of procedures or steps through which a systematic approach is developed. Like in science, there are steps, step A, B, C, D, E, that is followed in science in laboratories because they are objective in nature, they are repetitive in nature. What scientist A would do, if B follows the same, the result would be same. But in social science, human behaviors are very, very complex. People may behave in a different way in a specific context. If you ask the same question with other people's around, their answer would be very different. But matters, whether they're living beings or physical matters, they would behave similar fashion in a laboratory, but humans behave differently. But then in anthropological or ethnographic research, how you design a scientific method to have repeated answers, repeated observations, which holds true. So there are some designs that also can do this. Then there is historical method. Historical method is primarily concerned with the past and attempts to trace the past as a means of understanding the present. Historical method is used to understand the present, but by using data from the past. As I gave the example of this old lady, So you can ask what was her life, her childhood, how she got married, how was the family in the beginning, how was her mother-in-law, and how she led the life, raised the children, how a daughter-in-law, when she becomes mother-in-law. So what is the difference between two generations? So these are all historical methods to understand the present, to compare what was in previous generations and what is now. So historical method is just like that. And because when you want to see the transition, the changes taken place in a society, since we do not have any method to go back in time, ଆମେ ଜାଣିପାରିବା ନାହିଁ ଯେ 50 ବର୍ଷ 60 ବର୍ଷ 100 ବର୍ଷ ତଳେ କ'ଣ ହେଇଥିଲା କାହିଁକି ହେଇଥିଲା କେମିତି ହେଇଥିଲା in all the situation we do not have documents. Maybe we have documents on history of Mughals, suppose the kings or monarchs we have, but we do not have for common people, common communities, ordinary people. So you have to have a technique, a method to go back in time by asking people who are living in present, but their opinions, narratives, and then some circumstantial evidences. You, in historical research, you may incorporate, apart from your interview, intergenerational interview, you can also substantiate with all the documents, papers available with you. But in historical research, suppose another important, now there's a self-study, or studying own community, or village studies. So these kind of concepts are coming in anthropology, because most of the writings about our own society, individual societies, tribal, rural, agrarian, or urban, or as a whole of about India. Initially, it was done during the colonial period, especially by Britishers or Englishmen or Indian people trained by them. So most of the outsiders have a specific, some people accuse them having biased view. So what they wrote, their opinion about groups were biased, not done on good observation. So that is why there is a movement now to restudy those communities, especially by members from their community. So many of the tribal people say they're criminal tribes, they're backward, they have these practices, they're obscurantist, all this kind of thing, because that is bias. So now, and they are the source of, suppose if you go to study the Naga, so Britishers have written about the headhunt, Naga the headhunters. Means they hunt the head, they kill the person, eat the head, something like that. So that is, many Naga people feel that that is very derogatory. They said no, our history should be rewritten, and now we should write it. What was that? What was headhunting? Something like that. And then the comparative method. Comparative method is an integral part of anthropology, because always in back of your mind you compare, and comparison is something that gives a better picture of a community. That is a tool to analyze one by one, A with B, B with C, and then you give. Because if you look at Franz Boas' time, Franz Boas reacted to armchair anthropologists who indiscriminately theorized and proposed concepts uh, about certain things without going there. But when people started studying the other community, they started comparing that community with their own or other studied communities. So comparative method becomes an important element of study in ethnography research. And according to Modak, the justification for such cross-cultural analysis, comparative is a cross-cultural, comparing one culture with the other, could be put down in 7 points of view. One is culture is learned. The culture can be learned, can be passed from generation to other generation. Culture is inculcated. That can be inculcated means you learn it and then put it to yourself. Culture is social. Culture is ideational. Culture is gratifying. Culture is adaptive. Culture is integrative. So Murdoch talked about all these things. And then briefly, Genealogy and pedigree. So genealogy and pedigree, you must be knowing it very briefly because I have to wind up in 10 minutes. Genealogy and pedigree. This is one thing. Just drawing your family tree, and that is a good tool for ethnographic research to understand the kinship structure. This has a lot of utility value. Many people do it for understanding the kinship structure, whether it is classificatory or otherwise. And by tracing that, you tend to understand how group formation or family line is created and divided to form newer groups. And especially by biological anthropology, genealogy is done to understand marriage patterns, especially endogamy, marriage between same clan. And because marriage between same clan or endogamy leads to pass on of number of Mendelian disorders or diseases, genetic disorders. So by studying genealogy, they would look at how the gene has transmitted from one generation to the other. If I give the example of the monarchy or the king's family in Britain, they have followed a particular pattern of marriage because they thought that their blood is very superior. They should not get a bridegroom from others' family. That would dilute the superiority of the blood. So they wanted to marry within the group, smaller group, and that is also practiced in many of the princely families, the king's families. So the royal families. So those practices have a social, economic, cultural, and political basis because they wanted to keep the wealth intact with the kinship, kin group. They also wanted that the political power should not be diluted with others. It should be revolved around the smaller groups. And there are other economic and other factors for that. But that becomes a major reason why some deleterious genes, some genetic disorders remain with the family, and there is a large number of deaths within the family due to this passing on of deleterious gene. So that is why physical anthropologists, when they go for ethnographic research, they apply genealogical study as a good tool to understand the society and culture. Similarly, the pedigree or genealogical method is also used to understand the demographic pattern of a community. What is that? Suppose if you want to understand a woman's reproductive performance, how many children he has given birth, how many have died in the womb, like as abortion, as stillbirth, as miscarriage, and then how many are surviving, how many are were born live. All these things, it is better if you draw a genealogy. Genealogy will tell you the relationship both in vertically and also horizontally to map the family structure, whether it's the nuclear family, joint family, extended family, three generation or more than three generation family. All these things can be done through the help of genealogy. And and this reproductive performance can be traced if you use genealogy as a method. So that is why in ethnographic research, genealogy or pedigree become important tools both by social anthropologists and cultural anthropologists. If you look at the WHR reverse work on genealogy, because he's father of like kinship studies. Somebody yesterday asked me how many fathers are there, but people who are the pioneers in a specific field, WHR River is known for kinship studies. So he used genealogy. Pedigree tracing is used more in biological anthropology. Genealogy is in cultural anthropology, to trace the kinship structure. And in a book, a lot of examples have been given on how to draw pedigree and diagram. The person that becomes the focus of your study, from whom you start drawing the genealogy, is called as ego. And from that, you go and describe. For example, these are the things you can study in your, and there are a number of symbols used. Suppose triangle and rectangle or round circle. Okay, that you can study. One is classificatory, and then this will be important: classificatory and descriptive. For example, while drawing genealogy, uh, for example, in English terms or European relationship kinship terminology, you also say same word uncle to mother's brother, to father's brother also. But in many societies like ours, we have mamu for mother's brother. We have dada or badawapa or kaka for father's brother. So many societies they have different terms for all different kinds of relationship, and in some they have few. Suppose they would have for grandfather they would have same term, grandfather both in mother side, father side, three, four generation, five generation. They would have same term for grandmother, even if it is more than three, four, five, six, same term. Some people would have very different term for different relationship. And then you must also learn genealogical abbreviations like B for brother, C for child, but Z for sister, S for son. So this is given in your book. You can do that. And then the concept like classificatory and descriptive comes up with discussion. So sorry. Yeah. So these are the important things. What we discussed is what is ethnographic research, what are the methods of doing it, tools, techniques, and other thing, and what are the different methods of studying: scientific method, comparative method, historical methods, and then the genealogy and its utility and how you use genealogy. So this part you can see because this is pictographically given in a book. So with this, I have to stop here. If you have any questions, otherwise we stop here. Yeah, if there is not much question, so I stop here. I thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.